would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundagara land and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Nancy. Thanks for joining me.
Awesome to be here.
Now, before we sort of kick straight into it, where in the world are you?
I'm calling in from Calgary, Canada, which is also the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Kainai, Tsuut'ina, and the Nakota Nations and the Métis Nation, Region 3.
Lovely.
So I'm happy to be a settler here and honored to be still welcomed, even though my ancestors did not do it very well. But we have a beautiful neighbor, Brenda, across the street that is teaching my kids how to smudge and all the wisdom from the ancestors. So we're happy about that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. What a lovely experience for your kids. How beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now I love to start with a very broad, very vague question, which is, where does your story start?
That's nice. My story, as I know it, starts with Bill and Muriel, who were on a farm in Drumheller, where the dinosaurs are from, and Margaret and Alan, who were on Saskatchewan lands, and then they had kids who had me, and I'm the ours from a yours, mine, and ours story. So my parents were each married before and had kids, and then got divorced and came together and had me. And so I'm kind of this glue that tries to hold my whole family together. And I realized after a lot of therapy that I don't actually have to do that. And I stopped trying to do it so hard, I don't have to.
I was like, my therapist brain
better.
just turned on. Going, oh, we don't love that. We don't need to be glue.
Oh, you should know.
What flavor of religion were you raised in?
Another good one. I was raised in Christian religion, Alliance and Baptist, and some CRC, with Christian Reformed Church. It's a Dutch tradition here in Canada. And I was professional Christian growing up. My parents were missionaries in Kenya.
Okay.
And then I went on to be a youth pastor and get a undergrad in youth ministry, and went on all the way to get a Master of Arts in spiritual formation.
Oh, I love that.
I've now expanded my spirituality to see the value in all traditions, and see that the root of any tradition, like if you look at the mystics in any tradition, it comes to love.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's the topic of any religion, if we really look at it.
Yeah. Is that something that you learnt as you got older and as you started to explore, or was that something that you grew up hearing?
Oh, no, no, no. That was too scary to hear or look at or be allowed to look at. It was
Yeah,
definitely during my master's that my box got exploded
yeah.
and my spirituality just was like, whoa. And my parents were definitely worried about me when I was
Mm,
exploring all these things and like, what? The tree could have God in it? What? No, this is getting too far, Nancy. Like, watch out. So
yeah.
it's
Yeah,
been it's
because
been a journey.
yeah, I guess, I hear like Reformed theology and I sort of think, that's quite conservative in terms of, theological beliefs and things like that. So, what messages were you raised with about yourself and about the world around you?
Mhm. Um, about myself that I'm depraved, that I am bad and sinful, and I need Jesus to
Mm,
save me from that. And about the world that like it's all bad out there too, and
mm,
stay, only marry a Christian, only be friends with Christians, only listen to Christian music, no secular music.
mm,
That very like us versus them mentality, and so
mm.
much fear that governs so much of what we did, and so many years now of unlearning that and
Yeah.
seeing beauty in everything, and
Mm,
that's a stretch for my family still.
yeah. Yeah. Did the type of theology that you were raised with impact how you viewed God growing up?
Yes, but I was reflecting on this recently with my partner about in some ways I really am grateful for my relationship, at least with Jesus growing up, because it really felt like this camaraderie,
Mm,
and it got me through a lot of things, like, moving in junior high to Africa and not knowing anyone, starting fresh,
mm,
being in a boarding school all by myself in grade 7, and being like, uh, so I had my homie, Jesus, with me all the time. And like that constant love, I really embodied. And she was saying, like, I've never seen someone who's so self-confident as you. And she thought, I'll get to the bottom of it after I get to know you better, and I'll see the cracks in it. And she's like, there's cracks, yes, but it really is real that you really do have this love of yourself that is authentic. And I was like, I think it's from Jesus, actually.
yeah.
And so I think that has been a gift of that heritage for me.
Mm,
Thankfully, I didn't get so much of that, like God in the sky judging you and things like that. I got this very tangible,
mm,
real relationship that I always feel like I'm surrounded by love. So
yeah.
I love that.
I'm curious how you were able to separate those two things growing up, particularly as like a young person. We often just absorb, the things that we are taught by our family and the people who are closest to us. How were you able to sort of separate the Jesus that you knew versus this sort of like very dominant masculine God that you were being taught?
Oh no, I
I love when people don't know.
yeah, I'm like stumper. Um, yeah, I don't somehow early on I got this memo that it was like my relationship, and I am so loved. And I think I'm looking at it now through my lens where, I'm daily writing love letters to
Mm,
myself.
mm,
I could tell you more about that later from Liz Gilbert if you don't know about those. They're amazing. And so maybe I don't see all of the ways that I used to feel very condemned and wrong and guilty and shame-filled, because my family does have a big heritage of shame, and like this motion of like yay is
mm.
big, and
Okay.
it's yeah, it's still there,
Yeah.
but yeah, I've been able to circumnavigate it somehow, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah. What was it like to be a missionary kid?
Mm, I loved it for the most part. Um, we would go to school I went to Rift Valley Academy, if any of your listeners have heard of this place. It's kind of one of the biggest missionary kid boarding schools in Africa.
Yeah.
And we would go to school for 3 months and then get a month off. And so it was kind of this amazing, like you're there, you're with your friends at camp all day, every day. And then you go off and have this amazing adventure in the middle of nowhere where you get to drive a motorcycle around and
Mm,
like do cool things. And so in some ways it was a really neat life.
mm,
But then in other ways it was also really weird because we were considered rich in Africa because we were white and
mm.
we had everything we needed and saw so much poverty around. But then when you go back to your home country, you're considered kind of a pauper and you have to go around and beg for money from churches and
Yeah.
things. So it was weird. Like the only way I could communicate with my parents was through a CB radio. So
Oh,
we'd have to
wow.
be like, how's it going over back and forth, and it was like a party line so anyone could listen in if they
Yeah.
wanted to your Sunday call with your parents. And so it was pretty crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine that at the beginning that probably felt fun, but then it's probably not fun eventually because that it changes your connection with your parents
Hmm.
quite significantly, I would expect.
Hmm.
Yeah. What was it? I mean, what ages were you when you were in Africa?
Grade 7 to 9,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
junior high. Yeah,
Yeah.
just before secondary.
Mm. Something that I often hear when talking to either ex-missionaries or ex-missionary kids is the transition coming back to their home country can feel very
Mhm.
disorienting. Do you remember what that was like for you?
Yeah, it was kind of stilted because we came back for year 10
Mm.
and then supposed to go back for 11 and 12 to
Uh,
Kenya, but we didn't end up returning for those last 2 years for a bunch of different reasons. And so
mm,
I I got to go back to Kenya with my dad after year 10 from our summer in Canada, and we went back and um, I got to say goodbye, and I had this image that like it was the best place ever and I couldn't wait to get back there. And then I went back to say goodbye and, heard all the terrible things that were happening at the boarding school and the
yeah,
frustrations with the leaders and like all the things. And I was like, okay, right, it is a different place. And I
yeah.
still had a bit of that mentality though, because then we moved again and started fresh again at a new school for my last 2 years of high school. And it was it was just talking to one of my friends about that the other day because she and I have kept up all these years, and she was like, "Yeah, you were so weird." And I showed up with like this like short blonde spiky hair, wore all these mismatched patterns and like an Africa jungle print shirt and like all these different things and just like walked around. And I kind of had this mentality of, I know I'm not going to fit in because this is where it was the Christian Reformed Dutch high school. So they were all tall, blonde, same.
Hmm.
And I'm quite short and was just like, no, I'm not going to fit in here. So I'm just going to be myself. And, the counselor you might challenge, is that really yourself or is that like an exaggeration? The other side to be debated. But I just was like, I don't really care. And she said that. She was like, you didn't care whether we liked you or not. So then we liked you. And I was like, nice.
Mm, yeah. I mean,
But I definitely miss my family back home
yeah.
because my friends had become my family.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like change is difficult for most people, but that's a lot of change during some very formative years.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I wrote a lot of songs. I play guitar and sing, and so I would, write songs about missing my people over there. And
Mm,
um, yeah, I tried to go back, I think, in some ways to relive what I felt like I had lost. And so for my undergrad, I went back for my practicum and was a dorm mom at the boarding school I went to and taught at the
mm,
school. And it didn't work. it just was salt in the wound because I missed out on these amazing trips that the seniors would go on to hike up Mount Kilimanjaro or get their scuba license at the ocean. And I
Mm.
didn't get to go then, even as a staff on these trips. I just had to get up early and see my girls off on these trips and just was like, oh, so sad. So I
Yeah.
don't recommend trying to like relive the childhood things you lost out on because it's never as good. Never really
It's
works.
never quite the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what was it like for you, sort of, coming out of high school into adulthood? I often find that's when people often start to explore faith and spirituality and religion on their own terms outside of, I guess, what their parents have perhaps taught them up until that point. And so, what was that transition like for you?
Well, I ran off to Australia.
Yeah, we love that. Everybody come and run to Australia.
Year
Oh,
2000, got to be there for the Sydney Olympics. And I went to Cape and Ray Bible School in Mossvale,
oh wow.
New South Wales. And so which again was a very conservative, male dominated, like to the extent that they had work days every Wednesday.
Mm.
And girls would do the kitchen jobs and the vacuuming in the house, and the boys would do the outside fun jobs of mowing lawns and building shit and just like, come on. So I really pushed against those rules because I grew up with a dad who was a builder, so I was always out doing that kind of thing, and finally got to be allowed to do painting.
All right. Okay.
But
How
it
did
was actually
how did the community and the school respond to that pushbacks? Like, what was that like for you?
the teachers did not like it at all, but the students were all like, yeah, we should all be pushing for this. And it's
Yeah.
time for change. And I think I've changed it. But it
Yeah.
actually was a really formative time for me. I remember being on the Great Ocean Road
Mm.
and driving along with one of my friends from that school. We'd gone on a break, and I told her for the first time that I said out loud that I'm gay to someone.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and I came to that bravery to be able to say that to her because the night before I had been all alone in this place in Melbourne visiting a friend, and she was out, and I was listening to Jennifer Knapp. Did you ever listen to her? She's
Yeah.
amazing singer songwriter, and she, one of her songs, I was just like so connected to it, and it felt like she was like saying my truth.
Mm.
Later she came out herself. I didn't know that at the time though, and so I was just like, and feeling like so alone and like I needed to say this out loud, but I didn't know where I could. And thankfully this friend received it quite well, and
Mm.
still loved me and still slept in a tent with me. But like that was one of my fears, is that she
Mm.
wouldn't want to do that as a good Christian girl. She
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a good Christian girl. She had tattoos, but
Oh, okay.
um, we stayed
Slightly
friends to
less.
this day.
Uh, I mean, if we and I'm asking, I guess, this like take a step back type of question because I know what it was like for me, but like that moment where you told your friend, I am almost certain would not have been the first moment you entertained that thought. So
Right.
what was that sort of like back and forth in your mind and in your heart around your sexuality like up until that point? Being surrounded by like quite conservative Reformed Christianity.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever really like it popped into my head was I was maybe about 12, and I remember seeing a news post where it was like, not post because we didn't have posts in those days. It was on the TV, the television, used my remote and put it
Yeah.
on, and this kid was in trouble at school for bullying because he was gay and everyone was making fun of him, and I was like, oh, what if that happens to me? And I
Oh,
got really
yeah.
scared.
Yeah.
And so I was like, but I didn't really know what that would mean or what, like I was quite tomboyish as a kid, but
Mm.
I didn't like. I had no context for even thinking about that or looking at that. And I had an uncle, I still have an uncle who's gay,
Mm.
and he did not have an easy life. And so I think I had a little bit of like, I hope that isn't my story. Then fast forward to grade 12, I was reading Philip Yancey's book, What's So Amazing About Grace, and which you probably also know.
I do.
And there's an article in like one of the chapters is on Mel White, who's this super Christian pastor who came out and then lost his wife and his family and his church and all these things. And I was just like gripped with fear of like, oh, what if that happens to me? Because I already knew at that point I wanted to be in ministry of some kind. And I had no context to think of being able to come out and be in ministry. And so it was like, how am I going to hide this well enough? And so I actually wrote him, and he wrote me back
Wow.
amazingly and was like, hey, thank you for sharing this. And is there someone in your real context of life that you can talk to about this?
Yeah.
And so I thought to tell my youth pastor, and she and I were quite close. And unfortunately, the main thing she did was like, here's the passages that say it's wrong. Like, let's pray it away together.
Mm.
And so we did, and I kept pushing it down and pushing it down. And
Yeah.
then the next year is when I told Mel. And then, fast forward basically another decade, and enrolled myself in conversion therapy and
Mm.
tried to pray it away even more with that. I almost married a man who also is gay,
Mm.
also a common story, I think.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, no, like none of this is working, none of this is right, none of this is my true self.
Mm.
And so finally at 33, I came out and I've been living more and more authentically who I am since then.
Yeah. What led you to, I guess, in like, and I think that's actually a really interesting point because a lot of people think that conversion therapy or conversion practices are often externally inflicted on people, but actually sometimes they are self-inflicted on ourselves. And so,
Mhm.
what was it that led you to that point where you were like, actually, I need to enroll myself in, and obviously, like, you wouldn't have used this language that I'm about to use, but like, enroll myself in this like horrifically abusive program that's like going to be like awful for my self and spirituality. But what led you to get to that point?
Peer pressure.
Yeah. Mm.
As I think about it, I think that was part of it is that, like one of my friends was going to this group because she um, was having an affair. And so she wanted to go and get help to, come clean for that. Another friend, I can't remember why she was going, but eating disorder. And so
Mm.
they had it as this broad context, right, of like coming to get help for these different vices. And
Mm.
I was actually just moments ago talking with another friend who also went to the same conversion therapy program, and he was talking about how damaging it was for him because like we were lumped in with like people who are into pornography and child abusers and like all these different things. And so it really was this weird, like, what is going on here? And like these very intense prayer groups that, they're trying to keep you accountable and keep you on the straight and narrow. And
Mm.
it's a different thing. And it just goes so against this whole aspect of like getting to know who
Mm.
we truly are, what we're truly desiring under any kind of behavior that may not be a wise behavior, and lumping them all together and not no space to like reflect on like what is our actual need deep within here. And so it's very
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah. And so, what was the moment for you where you came out? Because I know that that process, a lot of people think. coming out, there's like parties and streamers and it's all loves and sunshine and rainbows. But the reality for a lot of people is that that's not what it looks like. And so, what was that moment of self-acknowledgement, but also acknowledging it to other people?
Yeah, like as you know, like coming out is such a continuum and it's continually happening. So it's like I'll try and zoom into one moment that kind of articulates that. I was at one of my good friends' wedding and we had gone to Christian summer camp together for years and she was marrying a woman. And so I wanted to go to this all-inclusive wedding in Mexico. And I was scared because I was like, it's gonna out me, I
Yeah.
think, being out there and and yet I was like, it's important. I want to support her and celebrate this time with her. So I went and we were all sitting around the pub one night and these guys walked in and they're like, oh, how many lesbians are there at this lesbian wedding? And our friend circle kind of just started laughing and we're like, well, guess, how many do you think? So they start going around the circle and they see our friend and she's got long brown hair and she's an Anglican priest and they're like, no, you're not gay. And she's like, yeah, actually, my girlfriend's waiting for me back home. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. And then they go to our other friend. She's got short blonde hair and she's a hairdresser. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're totally gay. And she's like, no, actually, my husband and kids are waiting for me back home. So then they get to me and they're like, and at this time, I had no shaved head on one side. I was like full head of hair.
Mhm.
And they're like, I don't know. And I said, I don't know either. It was like this moment of confession.
You're
And so
telling me,
then,
mate.
right? And it was like the cat's out of the bag from then on out. And
Yeah.
so I then started to like have some of those conversations with my people when I got home and I
Mm,
cut my hair. That was one of my outward expressions. And so I called my parents to tell them about this haircut and what it represented for me. And I
mm,
realized that I have a motorcycle license, but I don't want to drive a motorcycle because people might think I'm a lesbian.
mm,
And I wanted to have a funky asymmetrical haircut, but people might think I'm a lesbian. So I was like, all these ways that I was keeping myself small, even though in my work, I already was a spiritual director at the time and was like helping people face into the dark places and their fears and
mm,
live the most authentic them. And yet I wasn't doing it. And so it really was this moment of like, I don't want to live in fear of what other people will think of me anymore. I'm going to step into
mm.
living how I want to be and how I'm created to be.
Yeah. And was that stepping in, did that feel terrifying at the time, or did it feel liberating, or a
Mhm.
mixture of both?
A mixture of both. I say I often recommend to my clients like don't do it until you feel ready, until you feel
Yeah.
safe enough, because especially growing up in a Christian context,
Mm,
it is terrifying because you might very well lose your whole world
mm,
if you do this. And so I was really afraid of that, but thankfully I had lived in enough progressive spaces by this time. Like I
mm,
did my master's in Vancouver and went to a very progressive Baptist church that had women that were leading things from the front that were queer and got to see some really beautiful, loving relationships and realized, like, okay, maybe this is all right. And so I had enough windows of, I think this is possible. Even if all my old people reject me, I'll still have a few of my newer people to have support from. And so I'm
yeah.
thankful for them.
What was it like to tell your family?
My dad said I was ruining his life.
Oh,
And my mom said, well, I guess I'll have to get off the board of that conservative Bible college I'm on the board for. I'm not a
right.
good mom if I can't pray the gay away for her and things. And so just like, wow, just realizing how much who I am is their identity.
Mm,
And thankfully, I had this grace in that moment to picture my dad as like this toddler whose favorite toy had been taken away. And he
mm,
was just like having this temper tantrum of just like angry and mad and was just like it was kind of this weird out of body experience to just be like just observe and not get too latched into it and not too reactive.
Mm.
and have grace for him. And then even by that afternoon, he already had called me and been like, I'm sorry, like that was my own stuff, and I
Mm.
love you no matter what, and things. And so I'm grateful. It's been a long road of trying to figure out how to be in relationship, and
Mm.
especially for them because they still live in the conservative Christian world, and they don't have a lot of peers that understand me or what
Mm.
it's like. And so I still feel that little bit of can't fully love and accept every part of you. We love you for sure, but we can't always
Yeah.
celebrate all these things with you. And so that's still hard.
Yeah. It's like a constant force of tension almost of
Hmm.
not quite being
I
able to just like ease into that love and relationship and yeah.
I see that. It's a good way to put it. Like it's just the stiltedness of like
Mm.
I know they love me so much
Yeah.
and I know they're proud of me. And yet it's like this like the garden hose has been
Mm. It's like
cinched a
kinked.
little bit and
Yeah.
yeah, kinked, that's the word.
Yeah.
Kinked.
I don't know that Canadians or Americans would use that word, but Australians will use the word
No,
kinked for that.
that's the word I was looking for. But also, how funny is that? That my parents' love is kinked.
Oh, maybe don't use that terminology with them. They might not love
I
that.
won't do that. Yeah. But
Oh,
at the same time, let me also say that they also love me really well, and they
yeah.
are amazing supports of my kids and
Mm.
me, and just like, yeah, I really am grateful for the ways that they still show up all the time.
Mm. And so I ask this question. Sometimes people who are like listeners think that it's a weird question to ask, but they're and I think they think it's weird because maybe perhaps they don't understand and that's okay. But it is one thing to come out and to acknowledge, hey, maybe I might be queer in some way. And it is another thing to start having queer relationships because it's like
Mhm.
hitting a different part of you. And particularly if, for people who were raised in an environment where like you can have same-sex attraction, quote unquote, but having relationships with like queer relationships is a very different story. And so, what was it like for you to start exploring queer relationships?
Uh-huh. That's so good. I also have noticed that like with some of my clients, they only come out once they get in a relationship because then it's like you actually have to share this with your
Yeah.
parents or the world. And it's only worth it if it's because it's someone else, and which
Mm.
is like an interesting look at worth and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely amped up again when I started dating someone. And I think it hit my parents especially as like, "What? You're not going to fight this anymore. You're not going to pray
Mm.
away the thorn in the flesh." And like, yeah, I think that was disappointing for them
Yeah.
and things. But it also like it's such a continuum of the things that we grow in comfort with. And because I can remember, even being in my engagement photos and wanting to like stand with my long-haired side, not my shaved head
Mm.
side for the pictures.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, people will think I'm lesbian. I'm in a picture with a woman with rings on her fingers. Like
Oh.
there's so many funny things that we like
Mm.
rules that we stay with. Like even, oh, I don't want to live in the same house until we get married. And like what
Yes.
rules from Christianity keep but not. And
Mm.
it's a funny thing.
It is really strange. It's a really strange dichotomy, I think, because and I say that coming from like I remember moving in with my then girlfriend who is my now wife, but I remember still trying so desperately to like uphold these like traditional heterosexual
Yeah.
gender roles in the house, and yet I'm not living with a man, I'm living with another woman, and it's just not lining up. And I think people who have not experienced that perhaps don't quite get the weird internal struggle between like what you know versus what you are living and trying to marry that up and integrate them together so that they're not feeling like they're opposing forces almost. And yeah, it's a weird push and pull, I think, for a little while until you sort of like find your groove. Yeah.
Until you kink it up.
Yeah,
That's one of the beauties of
exactly.
it. Like you get to just play and be exploratory and make it up because yeah, we can step off of this patriarchal
Yes.
platform of like this is the way it has to be and this is the way it's always done. It's like
Yeah.
my partner right now, we don't live together, and that was really hard for me after my divorce. I thought like, okay, whoever I'm with next, like we will get married, well, she'll help me raise my kids and do these things. And she was like, no, I don't want to. I don't think that that's wise for us. And I was like, if we love each other, we must get married. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
actually, it's not necessarily the best thing. And it's actually really beautiful the ways that we each have our own separate lives and we come together, maybe a little less codependent than the average lesbian, but who knows?
Yeah, you're not fitting a lot of stereotypes there. Like, where's the U-Haul? Where's all of the
Yeah,
stuff?
I did that the first time and realized maybe this is not the best action.
It's funny because I think a lot of people think, obviously deconstruction is a bit of hashtag deconstruction, but I think a lot of people think that that's only happening in terms of the Bible or God or faith concepts, but actually, you deconstruct so much more than that. And, deconstructing what relationships look like and what gender roles look like, and not just romantic relationships, but parent-child relationships and things like that. And so, it sounds like, your relationship with your partner now was an ability to think critically and deconstruct what relationships broadly looked like in an authentic way for the both of you, as opposed to just what they should be. Yeah. And so I'm curious what coming out and living as an authentic queer woman, what did that do for your relationship with God?
I think, I was grateful for that church that, over a decade ago was already in a Baptist context having these conversations about
Mm,
could those scriptures be read in a different way than we traditionally have read them, and
mm,
helped me find so many ways that I could um, not have to just divorce my spirituality to embrace my sexuality.
mm,
And so that was really helpful. And so I felt in some ways like, I'm good with God. Like me and Jesus are still buddies and things. But at the same time, I did leave church after a
mm,
while after coming out, and just, like I had been leading worship and speaking and doing different things, but felt like I couldn't. I basically gave a coming out sermon and then did a mic drop and was like, I'm out.
drop
You
and run.
folks figure out where you're at. Because by this time I had moved to a conservative Calgary, and the church had not done their work yet on that matter. And so over the last decade, they have done that work. And I I would call myself now post-Christian. Like
Mm,
I don't necessarily identify with just being a Christian. I'm grateful for that heritage and some of the things that it taught me and that relationship that I got. But also, I find, some Buddhist practices that are so beautiful. And,
mm,
if you read Hafiz, like he's a Muslim mystic, and
mm,
yet he's one of the ones that has fed me the most lately. And so I was mentioning Liz Gilbert, and she's the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and she's started this practice of daily love letters, and she's created a whole community on Substack, and we're just celebrating 1 year anniversary of doing this together as a community. So every morning we start with, Dear love, what
mm,
would you have me know today? And then just writing whatever comes. And I find that to be the most nourishing spiritual practice that I've done in years. And it really feels like it's connecting me with God, the divine,
Mm.
my true highest self, my fear self, like that love that writes to me, she knows all the fears. I can't hide from that. And she also loves me so unconditionally. And so it's been this really beautiful way to access all of those parts and nourish them,
Mm.
totally aside from this like patriarchal top down God thing that used to happen. And so I'm really grateful for being able to have a renewed way of connecting with my own spiritual side, which
Yeah.
is all of my sides. And that's, a lot of the work that I love doing is helping people with their spiritual formation and like noticing what the divine is looking like for them these days and how they can access that and have some kind of relationship apart from whatever dysfunctional one they used to have.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to see how that shows up for each person.
Mm. It's that's a really beautiful practice that sounds like self-compassion on steroids almost.
Mhm.
Like it's yeah, which is um, you know, almost I mean, the first thing that sort of like comes to me is that it's almost like accessing the divine, whoever that is for you, by going inward as opposed to going outward, which is often the
Mhm.
opposite of what we are taught, which is to externalize everything. But actually,
Totally.
as soon as we start to internalize and we go inward and we access the divine by accessing ourselves, which is really
Mhm.
beautiful. It's a really beautiful
Yeah.
concept for people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, and you sort of just started to talk a little bit about it, but I do love to ask like where your sense of spirituality is now and what that looks like and um does that cause any tension for your relationships around you?
Mhm. For sure. Um, I'm often reminded that I'm being prayed for and worried about my salvation and things. And I often just like, no, I'm good. Like I feel very connected to God and
Yeah.
I I am God also, but I don't say that part out loud. And
Yeah.
I yeah, I would say that nature is another thing that really feeds me. And I'm
Mm,
always trying to find ways to help all of us connect with divine more. And so I've been talking lately about like, should I just start a church where we meet out at the river and we each find a rock or a leaf and then we bring it back and we tell us what God is saying about that. And um, I think, labyrinths are another way that I love connecting
mm,
with the divine, my higher self, wisdom. So yeah, tarot cards, or I would say oracle cards, a
mm.
little less alarming for people. I did actually speak in a Baptist church recently and used tarot oracle cards,
Wow.
and they were a little alarmed and not sure what to do with me. But I feel like people all the time open their Bible to whatever page and then close their eyes and touch on a verse and are like, this
Mhm.
is the verse for me from God, and then just read into it whatever they want to read into it. And I feel like these cards are about the same, where you
Yeah.
get an image or a word and you're like, what does this mean in your life? And it really is connecting you with the innate wisdom that you already know, but
Mm,
often we're afraid to look at and vocalize, say out loud. And so this is a way of connecting us to that deeper wisdom.
yeah. I love that. And I think one of the biggest questions that I remember asking was where does the Holy Spirit end and intuition begin? And I think it's one of
Mhm.
those sort of things that often there are so many overlapping experiences in terms of, like you just said, and just like randomly opening a page of the Bible to randomly picking an oracle card. And it is often, if conservative Christians can put the label of biblical on it, then it sometimes makes it okay. But the concepts are so similar, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
it's going, actually, can we like shaft labels in general and actually just look at what it
Mm-hmm.
is and what it's doing for you, and what it's not doing for you, and work with that as opposed to the labels. Um, yeah. But I can imagine, having been to a Baptist church quite a number of times, I can imagine that that would not have gone down as smoothly as what you just talked about.
They're
But I
they're
mean,
doing pretty well in their progressiveness, so it wasn't hell
uh,
didn't freeze over with that one.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like, though, there is still ways that you have found to integrate that part of you that wanted to do ministry, but also as an authentic, um, queer person, and not have to feel like you needed to choose between the two.
Hmm. Yeah. And in some ways, I did for a while put the spiritual side on a
Yeah.
shelf and tried to like fit into just being a regular life coach that
Mm,
helped with work and relationships and things. But in the last year, even I've come full circle around to, owning that I also am professionally trained as a spiritual director.
yeah.
And, that is a very special thing of being able to sit with people in that spiritual realm. And one of the things that helped me kind of reclaim that within myself is the documentary 1946.
Mm,
And it is so powerful. If your people haven't seen it yet, I recommend it. You can watch it, you can stream it online,
mm,
1946themovie.com. And it it really shows how this mistranslation is like a telephone game that's happened in the Bible over all these multiple revisions. And so in the year 1946 is the first year that homosexuality was mentioned in the Bible.
mm,
And it's like, it's crazy that that was a mistranslation from these Greek words that meant more of like
mm.
lazy and sexually exploitative. And imagine if sexually exploitative had remained in as something that they were condemning.
Yeah.
Imagine how the world would be different if that was the thing that was targeted rather than a whole people group.
Mm,
So it like moved from an act to a whole people group that was targeted. And so I had the opportunity to not only interview the director when she was making it a few years ago on my podcast, but then when it came and was streamed in our city here, I was asked to be on a panel. And um, I wanted to wait to watch it till we were there, but I probably should have watched it first because I was just like a puddle at the end. There's
yeah.
this one scene where they interview this guy who was a whistleblower on this project. And he's now an 86-year-old man. He's been gay his whole life, he's been a pastor his whole life.
Mm,
Thankfully, in the United Church, which he's allowed to be out. But they asked him, what was it like for you to be part of this documentary and to like have your words shown now? Because in some ways, I think he thought that nothing really happened, amounted from his letter. Because
mm,
they wrote him back and they said, yeah, we do think this is a bad translation. We're going to change it in the next edition. But that was 10 years later. And in that time, all these translations had been made. And so they asked him, like, what was it like for you to have this documented? And he's like, it's been life changing. Like, it really has made me realize I wasn't called to be a pastor in spite of being gay. I was
mm.
called to be a pastor because I'm gay and that there's this important work to do. And hearing that, I was like, oh my goodness. And just like goosebumps and shivers and tears. And then I was supposed to go up on this panel and they were like, what was the most impactful thing? Thankfully, there's an intermission and my partner saw me and she's like, are you okay? And I was like, no, but I can't tell you about it. I'll just start crying. She's like, it never takes as long as we think. And As the Nagoski sisters say, emotions are a tunnel. You got to go all the way through them, otherwise you'll be stuck in the middle. And so we went to a little room and I just cried and cried and cried. And I was like, I think I need to open myself up to this spiritual work again, and
Mm,
this pastoring that has been a part of my past. And so when they asked me on the panel, like what was most impactful, I told them this line, and that I'm open to being used spiritually again. And that's been a crazy thing. Now it's opened up all these opportunities to speak at some of these different churches and speak on some more of these panels and things. And it's like, okay, like I think it's time. There's enough of us now that are deconstructing, who are kind of like spiritual nomads, who are
yeah.
trying to figure out like what is home and what will feed me spiritually now. And so I love that we're on this. It's time finally to be doing this work together.
Yeah. And I mean, as like I'm a big sort of like energy person, and like I can like your body language changes when you talk about it as well, which is like it's really beautiful to see people um able to integrate all parts of themselves and not feel like there needs to be something that's put on the shelf because of the other. And so,
Yeah. I think
yeah,
that's such a common thing, sorry, for
yeah,
like
no,
Christians and queer people, because it's like you have to choose one camp or the other, because they're
mhm,
often like, why would you still be a Christian? Like they've been so mean to us, or oh,
yeah,
you're gay, you can't be part of this church. And so it's just like to really be able to integrate all those things. And I think I also realized I was ashamed of that Christian past, and I didn't want to share that with people. And so now to be like to lead with that. And
yeah,
I was just on an interview previous to this and meeting these two new friends, and I led with that story of being a missionary kid. And I wouldn't have done that years ago. I would
mm,
have hid that part, especially knowing that they're like queer leaders in the community. And by doing that, they then shared their very Christian heritage as well. And
mm,
they were just like astounded at my openness. And I think it helped them share that aspect of them that maybe they don't share everywhere either. And so I
yeah,
think it's neat to see the ways that when we can embrace the things that we thought were wrong or bad
mm,
in many different directions, we get more freedom, and that inspires freedom in others as well.
yeah. And I think that that's a really lovely transition into like what I often will end these episodes with, which is, like some encouragement, advice, thoughts, for people who are deconstructing. But I'm going to put a slight twist on it, which is, um, for people who are trying to integrate their sexuality or their gender with their spirituality and their faith. And what would you say to those people?
Come around, perhaps. And then the other thing I would say that I have to say to myself as well, which is listen to yourself, listen to your gut, and maybe it's the Holy Spirit. But I've also studied human design, which is a really amazing personality profile that takes wisdom from many different traditions. And 80% of the world, our gut center is our wisdom. And it
Mm,
only says two things. It says, uh-huh, and
mm,
And if we can listen to that, that's when things go smoothly. And that's when, like, we really can live in a peaceful place. And so I have to remind myself of that too, because the social connotations are what make that hard. Because
yeah.
someone might ask you for a date, or someone might ask you, to go, do you want to go to this restaurant? And you'll be like, uh-uh.
Mm,
But we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So we're like, okay, sure. But it's like the more we can only say yes to the things that are a deep yes for us,
mm,
the more life goes smoothly. And so may we all remember that, because
mm,
it is much more peaceful.
yeah. Oh, a deep yes. I love that. I love that
Mhm.
terminology. That's really beautiful. Um, Is there anything that you would like to share about the work you're doing with our listeners before we finish up?
I have called my work many different things over the years, like spiritual direction, coming out coaching. I'm trying on a new frame of my work. It's all the same thing, but I, I've been really looking at like it's about coming home to this place within ourselves that we've been told is wrong or bad, or that we can't trust. And so I'm starting to offer free workshops where we can come together and get some of these tools for coming home to ourselves. And
Mm.
so I would love if this, what I'm saying, is resonating with any of your people, to come. And I'd love to meet you and help that coming home process. And so the you probably have show links or something you do,
Yeah.
but my website is centered.ca, and I am home.
Lovely. And yes, all of that will be in the show notes if people want to reach out to you or connect with you in some way. I think the more voices that we can have in the space that are saying you don't have to choose between different parts of yourself, the more integrated and authentic people we will have in the world. And so
Mhm.
I appreciate the work that you do and your time to have this conversation. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for your amazing questions. You stumped me on a few, and that doesn't usually happen. And
I
so
love
I've made some notes. I'm going to go and do some more pondering because, yeah,
Oh,
this is really great.
I love that. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.